You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome back, everybody, to the scary place that is called my brain. This is Jacob Nelson, host of Reclaim Catholic. I do welcome you back after a brief hiatus. Just having so many meetings, and the good news with those meetings that are taking me away from doing as much recording as I would like to do is that more and more people are going to be joining us for Easter Vigil to come into the church, which is a wonderful gift, and I'm sure that's enough of an excuse on my part to allow your grace. So at least today we have so much stuff on my mind in the scary place, and that's why, in fact, I played the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath from Mozart's Requiem Mass, because that really ought to be the soundtrack that just kind of follows me around whenever I enter a room. I've recently just kind of been perusing Catholic Twitter, not to so much get fodder for the show, as much as maybe promoting the show and getting some people to think, and boy, have I realized just how toxic Catholic Twitter is. It is insane. People have so lost any sense of humanity for their fellow man, and it actually did inadvertently give me a lot of fodder for this particular show as we continue looking at social justice. When we look at things like the 3 principles of social justice, last week I had mentioned the compendium of the social doctrine of the church. I will put a link to that on my Patreon account for your ease of finding it. But that compendium of the social doctrine of the church is so important to us to understand just what we believe as Catholics. It's not enough to simply be a warrior for traditional masses or, accordion masses or polka masses or whatever it is that happens to be your preference. Some good, some not so good. But, being Catholic is so much more than simply what happens within the confines of the physical walls of the church, which we'll get to. Man, I just don't even know where to start. There's so much going on, especially in terms of this whole idea of the principles of social justice, which right away I'll just tell you are solidarity, subsidiarity, and participation. And we'll cover those as much in depth as we can today, because there are some really important things I would like to get to. But there's so much going on with those topics, and the church really needs to be speaking out about these things. And I've seen a couple of things from like Bishop Strickland, Bishop Corleone out in San Francisco, but by and large the church has been utterly silent, just silent. And this isn't an indictment on any particular person in the church. This is not an indictment on any particular priest or bishop or anything like that, unless they're siding with the the anti-Catholic side. But silence is as much of a choice as actively saying something. And that's a principle that we all need to consider in our own lives. Sometimes we do need to say things, and we need to feel uncomfortable, and we need to make others feel uncomfortable. A deacon that I know told me that in his homiletics class that he took years ago, he was given some sound advice, and in that homily, whenever a priest or deacon or bishop is to give a homily, one of the main aims of it is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I thought, boy, that is a great turn of phrase. That's right up there with anything G.K. Chesterton would have to say. But this whole idea of being uncomfortable and making others feel uncomfortable, that's something that we have to get comfortable with, to employ that in our own lives. So the silence surrounding these modes, these opportunities, these events of true social justice, to hear silence, to hear not really much at all, is bothersome, because, this is the whole reason why I wanted to do this show. is that we have these great documents, the Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church, everything Pope Leo XIII wrote, Pius XII, there's so many great documents, great letters that the Church has written to give guidance to her children this side of the grave. But we can have all the documents we want. If we don't hear them, if we don't read them, if we don't study them, if we don't hear from the pulpit or from apostolic letters from our bishops to employ these teachings, we might as well not even have them. And so I guess on the one side, the silence is affirmation that this show needs to happen. On the other side, I'm sad that this show needs to happen. That there's so much malformation, malnutrition, if you will, in the Catholic diet, that you end up getting just terrible, terrible examples of the faith in places like Catholic Twitter. But before we get too far into the examples, the synderesis, if you will, that is the particulars of Catholic social doctrine and examples of this. And before we really even get into Catholic social doctrine at all, there's one particular headline I wanted to just sprinkle into the show. And it doesn't have anything directly to do with this, though it does indirectly. There is an article I had come across out of Forbes magazine. And the author, Paul Hesse, I don't know. And it doesn't matter. Who cares? Anyway, he writes, as the SARS-CoV-2 virus continues to kill thousands of Americans each week, bioethicist Parker Crutchfield has suggested a controversial approach to battling the pandemic, namely a morality pill. Specifically, he suggests the widespread administration of psychoactive drugs could provide moral enhancement that would make people more likely to adhere to social norms, such as wearing masks and adhering to social distancing guidelines. Okay, a few things about this. Apart from just the complete and utter lunacy that we have found ourselves in, to call universal mask wearing a social norm already shows that you're absolutely insane. I am sorry if you think that should be a social norm. I'm not sorry for saying it. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Because it is not normal to want to hide your face from one another. My goodness, has this not been the problem since the Garden of Eden? They were naked and ashamed and they hid themselves. We are not to hide our faces from one another. It would be perhaps arguable if there was some concrete end to a particularly deadly pandemic. But the fact remains 99.8% of people survive and are just fine. And if you take the elderly out, the most at-risk population, the survival rate is at least as high as the flu, if not higher. So to completely hide our faces and all of the implication that has, depression rates, suicide rates, other mental health issues, there's been a multifold increase of children needing speech therapy because they're not able to read lips and see the micro expressions in faces. I mean, to call this a social norm is absolutely insane. Okay? Love, our highest virtue, is a social virtue. It is something that cannot exist within one individual. It must have multiple individuals in order for it to exist. And so the very nature to call something like mask wearing and social distancing a social norm already negates the entire nature of love. Understand this. The communist, the progressive, the trans activist, the BLMer, you go down the list of people who are on the left and the far left side of the aisle. They do not care about charity. They don't care about love. They care about raw power. That's it. That is the end game, people. They care about raw power. And it's evidenced in this. They want to separate people because when people are separated, love can't exist. And when that can't exist, it's easier to direct people according to evil intentions and to conquer them. So understand, this person is Parker Crutchfield, some absolutely horrible bioethicist, he has ethics. And he has morality. Don't mistake me. But they are corrupt beyond belief. This goes back to a point that I make time and time again, that every human person is a moral creature. You may look around and say, there's no way my neighbor is moral. That's not what I mean. They don't adhere to morality according to the standards you have for morality. But every person is a moral creature because the chief function of the intellect is to discriminate, that is, to choose one over the other. And in so doing, the intellect is making a hierarchy of goods. Good, better, best, good versus bad, and so on. That itself is a moral function, to choose the good or the apparent good over something else that is not apparently good. And to that end, if you ever hear a stupid statement, an asinine statement like you can't legislate morality, what they're saying is you can't put your Christian morality into law. We're not going to let you do that. But every piece of legislation is a piece of morality. It is saying do this and don't do that. Adhere to this apparent good and not that other one. Every act of legislation is morality, in action. The question then isn't whether or not it is morality, it is a question of whether it is good or evil morality. Or another way to put it, whose moral standards are being legislated? And that's the problem with this guy's so-called morality pill. I guarantee you this same guy, Parker Crutchfield, would in an instant denounce Catholicism for being too moralistic, for being too rules-based, for being too black and white. Well, think about it. The church has a moral standard, and it has something to say on morality in virtually any circumstance you find yourself in. The difference is the church also recognizes your free will to choose what is truly moral or to make for yourself your own moral code. And the church will always proclaim the consequence of that. You adhere to the moral code given to us by God through the church, and you'll reside in heaven forever. If you don't, if you make your own moral code, then hell is your lot. Because you've rejected God, so why would you reside with God? Okay, so the church will be clear about the consequences of your choices, but she's always going to let you make those choices. I know, shocking, right? If the church ever came out with a pill to make you moral, to make you more docile to her standards, I'd be the first to denounce it. It would be evil. It would be coercion of a horrible degree. But at least, and this isn't me agreeing with the idea, but at least it would be according to a moral good that is actually good for you. It would still be wrong, but this pill that Parker Crutchfield is suggesting, a psychoactive drug, that means it is active within your psyche, within your brain, altering your brain chemicals. A psychoactive drug that could provide, quote, moral enhancement. That would make people more likely to adhere to social norms. Well, who normalized these actions that are completely devoid of love? Who? Whose standards are they? Well, don't take this Forbes article as something that is crazy or would never happen, because how many times in the last 2 years have you heard something and you said, oh, that would never happen here? I remember when I first heard 15 days to flatten the curve, I immediately, and to anybody I knew, said, you can't adhere to this because anytime a government takes power, they will never freely give it back. Not once in the history of man has this happened. 15 days was never going to be 15 days. And anybody who's ever read any history would have known that. But fear is a powerful motivator. Well, to that end, in Canada, we have our northern brothers and sisters in a Freedom Convoy of, at this point, it's hundreds of thousands of trucks, semi-trucks in multiple cities, Ottawa, Toronto, Coots, which is the border crossing in Montana, and some other cities. And I've seen not just the big rigs come, but also the tow trucks that the police called to tow these big rigs away joined in. They came, they showed up, but they didn't tow trucks. They just went ahead and parked and made the convoy bigger. So good job, boys. But there's also the farmers with their gigantic tractors. And I saw recently somebody posted the daddy trucks are coming to join the baby trucks, and some of the big mining dump trucks have shown their faces, shutting down border crossings and all this. Now, this is a distinct kind of protest, different from the BLM protests that were experienced across the country in 2020 in the summer of riots, including in Minneapolis, Oregon, and you can go down the list, that were deemed simply mostly peaceful. I still have seared into my brain the CNN reporter who is standing in front of a building on fire and has the gall to say, it's a little fiery, but it remains mostly peaceful. Are you kidding me? And those were celebrated. Our own vice president set up, contributed, and promoted the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which made bail for these criminals, one of whom got out and murdered somebody. So thanks a lot, VP Harris. You know, you just screw up everything you touch. These are not the principles of Catholic social justice. The Freedom Convoy is something different. It's peaceful. They're building buildings to be soup kitchens to feed the homeless. They're taking care of the community. People have said they've never seen the streets of Ottawa cleaner. It's been respectful. Nobody's died. You know, you can't say that about the stupid Chaz Chop Zone in Seattle. They're adhering as much as possible in a semi-organized fashion to the three pillars of Catholic social justice. And that should be celebrated. It needs to be celebrated. Freedom is something that is so important to understand, and freedom is not simply doing whatever you please. Freedom is the right to act in accordance with the divine law. Freedom is the right to act in a charitable manner. And that's exactly what these people are doing. Because they oppose not the vaccine. They oppose a universal mandate that all must receive it, which goes against every medical practice that we've had since the memoriam of time. It's always been consult with your doctor. This is generally a good thing, but talk to your doctor. The government in Canada is trying to mandate everybody take this. Not everybody's a good candidate. And all they want is the freedom to be able to talk with their doctor and work it out in accordance with what is best for their own health. And the government says no. But that's what you get with socialism, and that's what you get particularly with socialized medicine. It's in part why it's been so easy to push that forward here in America is because of Obamacare. Man, when that passed, I was like 20 years old maybe. I don't remember exactly, but I remember watching this because I was already a political dork at the time. And all that ran through my head was, I think it was Obi-Wan Kenobi in one of the prequel movies of Star Wars. It said, so this is how democracy dies, was when Palpatine took over the Senate. And I thought the same thing. This is how democracy dies. Because it was rammed through. All the rules were broken. There wasn't a single Republican vote for this massive overhaul of a system that was not broken. Again, this offends Catholic social doctrine. And we had a bunch of so-called dirty and nasty Catholics who are actually more communist than Catholic. They only used the name Catholic to get elected, that were the architects of this. Do you know that Little Sisters of the Poor are still fighting against the federal government so that they don't have to provide contraception? And that was from Obamacare. That was Kathleen Sebelius, the director of HHS at the time, who was a self-purported Catholic. Where was the Bishop of D.C. at the time? Well, some lawsuits might shed some light on that, but nonetheless, these Catholics in government, it's not that they even don't understand Catholic social doctrine, they don't care. Which means that you need to care all the more. Because they will take the name Catholic and they will take the name social justice and they will take the three principles of subsidiarity, solidarity, and participation and drag it through the mud. And they don't care how many souls are lost to hell because they got their way on earth. So you need to listen to the church. Not to me. I don't care if you listen to me. All I'm doing is presenting the church to you. Now, we'll get into the three principles, and we're going to continue this next week. This is a brief intro, or whenever I can get to the next podcast, hopefully later this week even. The three principles: subsidiarity, solidarity, and participation. These are the three pillars that allow true justice to flourish within society. And when one of them is offended, the system starts to fall. And the notion of justice, remember, commutative justice, justice among equals, solicitude for the common good, justice that is between an inferior to a superior, and distributive justice, that is justice from a superior to an inferior. When one of those is lacking, all justice fails. And now all of justice is supported by these three pillars of subsidiarity, solidarity, and participation. And when one of those fail, it starts to undermine the entire notion of justice. And that's what we see going on around here. Going around our cities, our neighborhoods, our counties, our states, our country, and sadly around the world. Right now, as I speak, there is a pitiful example in China of the Olympics going on where they've incarcerated millions of Uyghur Muslims in the western part of China. And Xi Jinping had the gall, had the audacity to have the person who lights the Olympic cauldron be a member of the Uyghur class. It was a gigantic middle finger to the West. And nobody bats an eye. That same woman who went on to lose her event, nobody knows where she is. She's been disappeared. And yet the fun and the games go on. Well, there's not much you and I can do about that. Pray for her safety, pray for the evil to see the light of day and so forth. We can do those things. The most active thing we can do is to know our faith well, so that that evil does not get perpetuated around the globe, and particularly here at home. So subsidiarity, what is it? Subsidiarity is the principle by which the one closest to the person in need is the one who ought to help. So you see somebody on the side of the road, you can't just drive by when they're lying on the side of the road bleeding and assume somebody else will take care of it. This actually happens frequently where somebody goes, well, I'm sure somebody called the ambulance. I'm not going to bother 911. No, 911 wants to hear from you. They don't care if they get a repeat call. Okay? Maybe you're walking and you see somebody keel over and have a heart attack, and you walk by them and you start doing CPR. And you go, well, I tried for about 30 seconds. Good luck to you. No, subsidiarity would say you do what you can, and when the need arises where you can't fulfill it anymore, you bring in the next level of people. So in the example of, like, you're running through a park, exercising, somebody keels over, you call 911 and you start CPR as soon as you can, and so you've already elevated it to the next level because you're not a trauma ward. You can do a little bit at that moment, but it would be insane for you to call the federal government to come and help. I mean, that's just a good rule of thumb for anything in life. You know, don't call the federal government for any help. What did Reagan say? The scariest words of the English language are, hello, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It's true. Just look around. They screw up everything they touch. So, subsidiarity is this idea that it's very relational. It's in the moment. It is, if you're able to help, you do, and then when you can't anymore, you elevate it to the next level. This is a great argument for getting rid of things like the federal Department of Education and allowing states to take care of their own people. What does the federal department even do? There's not a national standard for anything. I just read a report. Since its inception in the 70s, they've spent over $1 trillion. And every single metric that they began with to now is either the same or worse. So there's a great example of why the federal government is terrible at everything they do. Okay? Subsidiarity. The one closest to the one in need is the one that ought to help. And part of this is because you know that individual the best. Even if you've never met them, you know the situation the best. Even the ambulance driver coming, 911 is going to ask for the scenario. Where are you? What are your surroundings? Is there anything there to help? And so forth. Because they don't know. You're the one on the scene. Okay? So there's the reality that the closer you get to the need, the better you are able to serve, because you have the most information available. Okay? That's subsidiarity. Solidarity is kind of the sense of brotherhood, a joining together. A great example of this is actually with the Freedom Convoy. It started with just truckers, and then the farmers joined in, and then the dump truck drivers joined in. Now the Americans are driving their trucks up there to join in. And it's growing and growing because they're in union with one another for the common cause, for the common good. So solidarity is this joining together of multiple entities, multiple persons, for the sake of the common good, for doing something good together. Sorry, I just had to get a little drip of coffee there. My throat's getting dry. I've had a great diet today. I've had a donut, a couple of cookies, and some coffee, so I am ready to go. Anyway, so participation is the last thing. Social justice doesn't happen without the participation of the individuals. And so everybody within a society is called to participate. You can't wash your hands and be a libertarian and say, well, somebody else will take care of it, live and let live. You do you, and I'll be over here on my 30 acres. And trust me, I want 30 acres of woods, and I want to get the heck out of society. I get it. But that would not, even in that reality, I couldn't use that as an excuse to not participate in society for the common good. Everybody has a role to play in society, and the church is emphatic about this because the church understands who her people are. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, you have a body and you have a soul. And yes, the church's primary mission is to get your soul to heaven, but guess what? After Christ comes again, you're going to get your body back. Because it's part of the nature of a human person to have a body and a soul. And so as such, the church is concerned, not just with the sacraments and not just with the liturgy, though the liturgy is of primary importance. The church is also concerned with all things material in the life of man. Understand this. The church is concerned with social structure, and rightfully so. Because if it's morality that gets you to heaven, that purifies your soul, keeps it pure, and brings you into the family of God, right? We were baptized, we have to remain a moral people. That's what gets us to heaven. Well, don't you need to be a moral person in the realm of economics, in the realm of politics, in the realm of manufacturing, in the realm of migration? You can go down the list. But the implication of being a moral creature, adhering to the proper moral code given to us by God through the Catholic Church, the implication of that is it needs to pervade all of your life. Wherever you go, wherever you bring that body, you are called to be a moral person. We're going to continue this in the next episode. And as we continue it, we're going to explore something I think that's really important we understand. My experience so far, just in a week or two, whatever it's been, of just kind of perusing Twitter, is obviously it is a cesspool. Okay, that is not surprising. But it's a cesspool in ways that I would have never fathomed. And it's really put on display for me, something that I've talked on a lot. But it's put on display just how deep this thing goes. And this thing is that we all have a bias regarding the hypostatic union. Right? Christ is human and he is divine, and he is 100% of both. And because we are not 100% of both of anything, it is hard for us to really understand what that is and what the implications are and so forth. And so we have this tendency regarding, or depending on what our particular values are, of either over-humanizing the Lord and as such demystifying him, or over-mystifying him, over-divinizing him, and as such dehumanizing him. And that has grave implications for how we end up living out the reality of social justice. And I see it on both sides. If you're listening, this is not just me denouncing the lunatic left, saying, well, they have beer and pizza masses, and all they're concerned about is serving the poor, and so they're desecrating the Lord. Yeah, well, that's true. You can't do beer and pizza masses. I don't know who needs to hear that, but it's not okay. But it happens on the traditional side, too. And I have seen some very concerning things. We're going to get to that next. We're going to get to that in the next episode. Ran out of time today. I got it saved in my phone. But understand, regardless of where you feel drawn to most to the Lord, in liturgical things, in the spiritual life of the church, just be aware of your bias, because the Lord is human and divine. We need to worship the Lord, for he has called us to, in the ways he has called us to, because of his divinity. But we also need to serve the Lord in practice, in the building up of human society, for the common good of all people, so that they might be most well disposed to receive him. So with that, we're out of time. We're going to skip Triumphant Church Tuesday. I apologize. I love doing that segment, but we'll get to it soon. We're going to carry this conversation on, you and me, next time I'm able to record. For now, let's pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. God bless you. It was a good show today. I had a lot of fun. It's going to be great next time. Invite your friends. Just, again, understand I'm on all the normal streaming platforms. Apple, iTunes, that is. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Patreon, all under the name Reclaim Catholic. If you do want to contribute, go to the Patreon page and you can contribute to this very important apostolate, I will call it, bringing a voice to the church in the modern world. For she has had a lot to say on it, and we need to start listening a little bit more. And the voices in the church need to be speaking up a little bit more about these great and wonderful principles. So I encourage you to contribute, but if you can't, if you don't want to, that's totally fine too. I want to do all of this for free on my end, and just trust in the providence of the Lord. So with that, God bless you. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk with you next time.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.